There's a hidden film quietly climbing the charts in America right now. No major buzz, no red carpet premiere, no flashy Marvel-level marketing push, and yet behind the glowing screens of millions, it's being watched again and again. People are whispering about it like they've discovered a secret. It feels raw, rugged, relentless, and the man in the middle of it all. Vin Diesel. But here's the twist. This isn't Fast and Furious. And no, it's not Riddick. This is the Mad Max movie you never knew he almost made. Before Tom Hardy. Before George Miller's glorious return in Fury Road. Before Charlize Theron's Furiosa stormed through cinematic history, there was another plan. A dusty, diesel-scorched road not taken. And on that road was Vin. Today, we're diving into the forgotten project that was supposed to reframe his entire career. The Mad Max replacement no one paid attention to back then, but now it's catching fire. The film is The Chronicles of Riddick, but it's not the space opera you barely remember from 2004. It's something deeper, something different. And the story behind it is just as intense as the movie itself. It begins not in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, but in a dim-lit office in Los Angeles almost 2 decades ago. Vin Diesel, fresh off the surprise success of Pitch Black, sat at a crossroads. He had 2 offers on the table. One was for a little indie project that could turn into a franchise. Cult sci-fi, low budget, big creative control. The other, a call came in from a studio with whispers of reimagining the Mad Max universe. And perhaps Diesel stepping in for the reboot that, at the time, seemed impossible to make. George Miller was struggling. Studios were hesitant. Mel Gibson was aging out of the role. Hollywood, in that moment, was toying with the idea of handing over the keys. And they were looking at Diesel. But in true Vin fashion, he didn't say yes. Instead, he chose something more personal. He chose to expand Riddick, not just another chapter, an entire mythology, a universe with its own language, codes, politics, religions. Galaxies at war. He went all in, even turning down future Fast and Furious sequels during that period. And that decision, it nearly cost him everything. The Chronicles of Riddick, released in the summer of 2004, was a monster on paper. A $100+ million gamble, built as the opening act of a sci-fi trilogy. And Vin, it wasn't just the star. He was the soul of it, the producer, the creative voice, the man on set at 4 a.m. walking through sandstorms and frozen tundras with prosthetics glued to his eyes so he could appear. Blind. He gave everything. But Hollywood didn't. The critics hated it. The box office underperformed. The franchise fell apart before it ever really began. People turned away from it, calling it confusing, overstuffed, trying too hard. And just like that, Diesel's great sci-fi gamble got buried. He returned to Fast and Furious not long after. Rebuilt his image. Made billions. But quietly Riddick lived on in his heart, and over time, something strange began to happen. The younger generation started discovering The Chronicles of Riddick, not as a box office flop, but as a kind of misfit masterpiece. A Mad Max in space. Violent, industrial, long-driven storytelling with roots in both fantasy and cyberpunk. The themes became eerily relevant. Imperialism, survival, individuality against a machinery of control. And now, in 2025, quietly, almost stubbornly, it has risen again. Streaming charts on Amazon, Netflix, Hulu internationally, and right here in America show The Chronicles of Riddick climbing week after week. No marketing. No interviews, just word of mouth, and buried beneath the dust of this resurrection is the truth. Vin Diesel had the Mad Max tone before Fury Road made it cool again. Watch the opening of Chronicles and tell me you don't feel it. Gritty, desolate. Worlds, leather fringe. Handcrafted weapons. Anti-hero running from a fascist army. It's not a duplicate. It doesn't try to be Mad Max, but there's something in the DNA of it, that quiet, mythological tone, the kind of sincerity you can't fake. Especially from Diesel. Because say what you will about his acting, his voice, his limited emotional range, but when he believes in something, he gives his soul to it, and behind the scenes of Chronicles, it almost broke him. Legend has it, he mortgaged property to help fund later entries, fought studios for creative freedom, argued to keep the tone darker, weirder, more brutal. He wasn't chasing audience approval. He was building a world that he desperately wanted to matter. But America wasn't ready then. In the explosive 2000s era of polished superheroes and sleek comedies. A Mad Max-style space epic, led by a bald, growling anti-hero got pushed aside, and when Fury Road finally came in 2015, stealing the cultural conversation, the comparisons rolled in. People began tweeting, "Wait, wasn't Diesel doing this 10 years ago?" But by then, he had moved on. Moved back into Dom Toretto's arms. Into black tank tops and billion-dollar franchises. Yet now, in 2025, the forgotten film won't stay buried. And it isn't just the film itself making headlines, it's what's behind it. How close Vin Diesel came to being the face of dystopian cinema. What few people know is how personal this movie was to him. Between takes, Diesel would reportedly listen to ancient philosophy. Obsessed with naming Riddick not just a character, but a symbol. A loner who refused to kneel no matter the system, no matter the empire chasing him. Sound familiar? It's the same heart that made Mad Max iconic, the same engine that drove Mel Gibson through the sand in 1979. That Tom Hardy picked up in 2015. Vin Diesel had that essence, but he never got the praise. Not because his film was bad, but because it came before audiences were ready. And that is the cruel beauty of timing. Fast forward to now, in a world post-Dune, post-Fury Road, we're hungry for myth again. Grittiness. Characters who live in the gray, and somehow, quietly. Riddick finally fits. It's not just streaming, it's trending. It feels like a second life blooming. Long after the funeral was held, people are seeing Diesel in a different light outside. Family memes and muscle cars. They're seeing the man who tried to actually build something. World. AMYTHOS. A hero outside the rules. It's making young fans ask, what other roles did Vin Diesel try to fight for? What else have we missed? And that question leads somewhere surprising, because in Hollywood, some stories are told. Others, they sneak up on you. When a movie dies, it usually stays dead. There are no second chances in Hollywood. Not really. Studios move on. Audiences forget. Even the actors eventually look the other way, but sometimes a film refuses to stay buried. Not because it suddenly becomes perfect, but because the world around it finally changes, and one day unannounced and unexpected, that forgotten film finds its breath again. That's what's happening to The Chronicles of Riddick in 2025. But this isn't just a comeback story for a movie, it's a redemption arc for a man. Because for Vin Diesel, this film wasn't just a role. It was his rebellion. It was his way of saying to Hollywood, I don't need your formula. He wasn't trying to be likable in Chronicles of Riddick. He wasn't selling wisecracks or dipping into superhero tropes. He was playing a convict, a killer. A man who survives not because he's clean, but because he's honest about the darkness inside him. That scared studios, and it confused audiences used to clear-cut heroes. But the truth, Riddick was an early reflection of who we'd all become. Flawed, fighting, lost in systems we didn't trust, And now 20 years later, audiences are starting to see that. They're no longer watching Riddick on a Friday night looking for popcorn. Fun. They're watching it the way you stare at an old photo of yourself and suddenly understand what you were going through. The world is grittier now. Post-pandemic, post-truth, post-superheroes, we want real stories again. Flawed figures. Rugged antiheroes who don't smile for the camera. In that landscape, Riddick fits like a glove. And Diesel. He was decades early to that tone. But maybe, just maybe, that's why it's working now. Because in an entertainment industry obsessed with instant results, Diesel took the long road. The bumpy one, the lonely one. He kept the character alive even when nobody else cared. He funded sequels. Out of pocket. Sold his house. Worked backroom deals just to buy licensing rights from studios. Unwilling to make another movie, but unwilling to let others do it either. He believed not in money, but in myth. And it started to pay off in whispers. 2013's Riddick. A low-budget return to the harsh survivalist tone of Pitch Black. It's made with scraps and still found its audience. And that seed, it's planted a decade ago, has grown because fans have found it again. They're binge-watching the trilogy on streaming. They're tracing the arc of a man who refused to bow to the system. They're seeing Vin Diesel, the meme guy, the family guy, the Fast and Furious icon in a new light. Under the layers of studio polish and social media jokes, there's an artist, one who sacrifices, one who wants more than franchise sequels, one who gambled on a dream and waited years for someone else to feel it too. It's poetic that in 2025, Hollywood explodes with nostalgia-filled reboots and safe algorithm-fed stories in old, risky, imperfect space opera is sneaking up the charts, and it all started with the same nay that made Mad Max timeless. A quiet world, a loner hero, a war not of guns, but survival. It makes you think, what if Diesel had taken the Mad Max role? What if George Miller had handed him the keys back in the early 2000s? Would Fury Road have ever happened? Would Diesel's career have taken a darker, more experimental route? Would we have a very different idea of who Vin Diesel really is? But that's not the road he took. He didn't inherit a legacy. He tried to build one, and now people are noticing. You can go online and see the shift in mood. Twitter threads analyzing the necromonger dialogue, YouTube essays calling Riddick ahead of its time, TikTok edits turning Diesel's gravel-voiced monologues into emotional resonance. Suddenly, the world that Vin Diesel kept alive in quiet corners feels like it belongs. And what's even more poetic, he might have one last shot to finish what he started. In interviews' subtle hush, he's hinted at it. A final Riddick film, a conclusion, one more story in the dark. But this time, people are listening. Fans are starting to push. Petitions, trend campaigns, streaming spikes. Because if Blade Runner can return, if Dune can be reborn, if Russell Crowe can get a Gladiator sequel 2 decades later, maybe, just maybe, Riddick gets his ending. And Vin, he gets closure not in box office numbers, but in finally being seen for what he tried to do. A man who built a myth from nothing, without a studio pushing it, without a franchise forcing it, without the cape, the suit, the CGI explosions, just a man. A shadow in the dark who refused to quit. And maybe that's why these numbers matter now. Not because they prove Riddick was secretly a masterpiece all along, but because they show that movies are more than opening weekend numbers. Sometimes movies are seeds left in the dirt, misunderstood, forgotten, until the world is finally ready to watch with open hearts. And when that happens, decades later, something beautiful blooms. Vin Diesel may never win an Oscar. He may never get the critical praise some of his peers enjoy. And he may always be judged by memes and tank tops and billion-dollar driving stunts. But behind all of thotties, a man who created something Dark, bold, broken. Human, just like Mad Max. So the next time you scroll past that thumbnail and you see Vin's silver eyes piercing from under the hood, don't skip it. Watch it. Understand it. Not because it's perfect, but because it means something. It's a love letter to darkness, to survival, to myth.end, to the artists like Diesel, who never stop believing that our stories deserve to finish, even if the world doesn't clap the first time. So yes, while Fury Road rightfully stands tall in cinematic history, there's another road. Dustier, quieter, overlooked, and on that road walks Vin Diesel head down, eyes glowing, still searching the stars, waiting for someone to follow.